Hi guys! We're going to do another story from the big storybook for children. Today we're going to do a classic, Rumpelstiltskin. Once, long ago, there lived a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter. The girl was both shrewd and clever, and the miller was very proud of her. One day, when the king was passing by the mill on his way to a hunt, the miller was vain enough to boast that his daughter was so skilled that she could actually spin straw into gold. The handsome young king was very fond of money and liked to keep the royal coffers well filled, and his eyes gleamed when he heard the miller's words. "Bring your daughter to the palace tomorrow, good miller, and we shall see if you are speaking the truth," cried the king as he rode off to join the chase. The next morning, after the miller's daughter had been politely greeted by the king, the monarch took the maiden into a room which was filled with straw. "Here is a spinning wheel and a reel," said the king. "Before dawn tomorrow, the straw must be spun into gold, or you and your father will regret his rash words." And locking the door firmly behind him, the king left the maiden to her task. The miller's daughter looked at the straw and she started to cry. "How can I spin straw into gold?" she cried. "The king will be so angry when I fail that he will order my father and me to be thrown into the dungeons." "Do not weep, maiden. I can spin straw into gold." "What will you give me if I do this for you?" said a voice. The maiden saw a dwarf walking in through the locked door. "I will give you my necklace," cried the miller's daughter. "That will do very well," cried the dwarf, clapping his hands in delight. He sat down at the spinning wheel and spun the spindle round 3 times, singing all the while, "Spin, spin, straw into gold, wheel, turn and spin. Spin, spin, straw to gold, wheel, turn and spin." And before the astonished eyes of the miller's daughter, the coarse straw turned to glittering gold. At dawn the king appeared, and when he saw the mountain of gold, he was both astonished and very pleased, but still not satisfied. He allowed the miller's daughter to bathe and eat a good meal, and then once again he shut the maiden up in a room with more straw. As he locked the door once again, the maiden began to weep at her sad fate. Then the door opened and the dwarf walked into the room. "What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold?" he asked. "The gold ring my father gave me," cried the miller's daughter, taking it from her finger. "That will do very well," cried the dwarf as he sat down to spin. Once again he sang, "Spin, spin, straw into gold, wheel, turn and spin. Spin, spin, straw to gold, wheel, turn and spin." And at sunrise the next morning, the king found the miller's daughter seated at her spinning wheel, surrounded by more gold. The king was delighted when he saw the gold, and he decided that a maiden who could spin straw into gold was fit to become his queen. He took the miller's daughter into an even bigger room filled with a huge pile of straw. "Spin this into gold for me, and tomorrow will be your wedding day," he said as he locked the door. The maiden was overjoyed at becoming the king's bride, but when she saw the pile of straw, she burst into tears. Suddenly, the old dwarf appeared yet again. "I have nothing left to give you," sighed the maiden sadly. "Well, when you become queen, will you give me your firstborn child?" asked the dwarf. "Oh, I will," promised the maiden, who would have consented to any request at that moment. And immediately the dwarf sat down to spin, and soon the room was filled with gold. The miller's daughter danced for joy. Today would be her wedding morn. And so the miller's daughter and the king were married, and as the days passed by happily, the queen forgot all about the strange little man who had spun the straw into gold. 1 year after the wedding, a beautiful daughter was born to the queen. Elaborate plans were made for the baby's christening, for the king and queen were very proud of their baby. But one day, as the queen was singing a little lullaby to her daughter, the dwarf appeared in the room and demanded the child as the queen had promised. The queen pleaded with the dwarf to change his mind, offering him gold and jewels instead, and at last, overcome by her tears, the dwarf said, "I will give you 3 days in which to discover my name. If you do this, you can keep your child." And with that, the dwarf disappeared. All that night, the queen lay awake, trying to think of the dwarf's name. The next day, she sent out messengers to every town and hamlet in the kingdom, asking the messengers to try to discover any strange or unusual names. That evening, the dwarf appeared and demanded to know his name. Is it Barnaby, Melchior, Tobias, Crispin, Redcap? Merrylegs, suggested the queen hopefully. Nay, nay, my girl, 'tis none of these. Try again tomorrow, said the dwarf, and he vanished from sight. On the second night, the queen tried out all the funny names her messengers had heard. Is your name Spindleshanks? How about Spiderlegs or Gooseneck? Is it Knockernose? Toothy Teeth, Bandy Bones, she cried in despair. My name is my own, retorted the dwarf. Tomorrow your child will be mine. And once again the dwarf vanished. The poor queen was now in great despair. I shall never discover his name, she wept. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and in came the last of the messengers that the queen had sent out. What news do you bring? Asked the queen. I have a strange tale to tell you, replied the messenger. As I came to the wood where the fox and the hare meet, I saw a little hut in a clearing. Outside, a fire burned, and a little man was dancing around the fire singing. Merrily a feast I'll make, today I'll brew, tomorrow I'll bake. Merrily I'll dance and sing, for tomorrow a child I'll bring. For neither girl, boy, man, or dame, no, Rumpelstiltskin is my name. The queen began to smile, and she cried, The news you bring me shall be well rewarded, messenger. Your tale has given me the answer I seek. The messenger went off rather puzzled, and the queen awaited the final appearance of the dwarf. Well, your majesty, you know why I'm here, cried the dwarf as he peered into the royal cradle. This is your last chance to save your child. What is my name? The queen pretended to look worried. Is it Silverlocks? She asked. No, guess again, mocked the dwarf. Is it Golden Ears? Asked the queen. No, you may guess just once more, cried the dwarf. The queen hesitated and thought hard. Then she finally said firmly, I know your name. It is Rumpelstiltskin. An old witch must have told you, screamed the dwarf. He stamped his foot in such a rage that a cavern opened up beneath him and he disappeared into it, never to be seen again. I mean, sorry for that tricky dwarf, right? I mean, trying to take a baby. Bye.